Look, I didn't want to be a half-blood. Being a half-blood is dangerous. It's scary. Most of the time, it gets you killed. If you think you might be one of us, my advice is turn away while you still can. Believe whatever lie your mom or dad told you about your birth. Try to live a normal life. Because once you know what you are, they'll sense it too. And they'll come for you. Don't say I didn't warn you.
Welcome back to the Cinema Club podcast. My name is Christopher Amick, and I will be your host for today's episode. The Cinema Club is like a book club, but for movies. Every episode, we invite members of the Cinema Club to be co-hosts for the episode who will choose the movie or television show and join Nick or I on the podcast to talk about that film or television show. Today, I am with Tim and Ruby, and we are back with our coverage of the Disney Plus Percy Jackson and the Olympians television series. We previously covered episodes 1 through 4, and we are back today covering the remaining episodes 5 through 8. So there will be spoilers involved in this discussion. But with that being said, happy to have you both back.
Happy to be back.
Thank you for having me back, Chris. I appreciate it.
Yes, always fun to dive into television and movies with the both of you. As far as Percy Jackson goes, I know all three of us have read at least the first book, if not the entire original series. And so I know that, at least for me personally, I was having a hard time sometimes not constantly comparing it to the book when watching the show. What were your thoughts now as we're looking back on the last 4 episodes as a fan of the original book?
I would say, like you said, big fan of the main book series. I haven't continued on, but I've seen a lot of book spoilers. And as a person who really loves this book and is a part of the fandom, I would say the TV show as a whole, if you look at it simply as a TV show, separate from any books or fandom, it's enjoyable. It's great to watch with your family. You'll have a great time. If you are a person who has loved these books, who is a huge part of this fandom, have been waiting for this day to come, I would say, for me at least, I was left very disappointed and with many feelings that came from this TV show.
I'm going to echo that sentiment. It felt like, in terms of the quality and of the show, it's a good show. It's not great. It's not must-see TV. If you think, oh, hey, that looks good, yeah, sure, I say give it a watch. You'll probably enjoy it. But as an adaptation, there's plenty that's left to be desired. I definitely did not care for some of the choices that were made.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. I have this issue with all adaptations, actually. I am always aware that when you take a book or a story or whatever it is and turn it over into a sort of cinema, there's going to need to be some changes. There's always going to need to be things you can include. There might be things you need to change or tweak. But I truly don't always understand why many directors or screenwriters feel the need to either take out very important pieces of information or add in very unnecessary plot lines. And in this series, they would tweak many things and change many things. And then they would have to continue to change things to work with the changes they had made. And so what started out as like, it's just this one small change would ripple into they'd constantly have to take out scenes and replace them with other scenes and do all these things different to make it work. And so because of that, it became in some ways very different from its source material. And I didn't enjoy the different that it was.
I'm going to echo that sentiment once again. First 4 episodes, I'm like, I'm not too thrilled with some of the changes made, but overall, I felt it was still a fairly solid adaptation. The last 4 episodes are not a very solid adaptation at all. And I'm like, oh, what the hell just happened, guys? Like, you have the author involved. Why is this so different?
Yeah, I think a good example of that at least popped out to me, I believe it was episode 7 or 6, when Percy is with Krusty and he has his trap with the beds all set up. And like the first thing out of Percy's mouth in that whole scene is, "I know who you are."
Oh,
And
yeah.
then he just explains every detail about Krusty and his trap with the beds. And at least for me, that was a really good example of what I had issue with in the show, because the show was addicted to just killing all the tension, suspense, and mystery that I experienced, at least in the books.
Yes, that actually touched on 3 separate things I was gonna talk about and discuss where I think that was a really big issue I had with the TV show, where it was so concentrated, where the pacing was off, where it was just so focused on pushing the storyline to get to the end, that there was never any time for any explanation, and never any time to actually live in a scene. Everything was extremely anticlimactic. I remember in the first episode, I talked about Medusa's scene, and I was just like, what even is this? And with each episode and each new character, each new fight, each new monster, there was never any real threat. There was never any mystery. There was never any lead up and there was never any payoff. And it just made you very frustrated watching it. I would also say, I think a really good example of what you were saying, where they changed it for me, was the golden chair, because that was not at all in the books. And the only reason it was in the books was because they had changed Annabeth and Percy being friends. And Annabeth's just been mean to him this whole time. And so now they're like, now we need a scene where, it's them being friends. And it's like, how do we get that to happen? And so they have to add in this story plot with this stupid golden chair and everything. And then it diverts from what was actually like happening in that scene, which is a great scene. And I was so mad watching that. So I was just like, what even is this? I will say, however, the love tunnel, the like, what is love? And Percy's, I think I've heard this song of Lair with the Dawn Extentis before. I went like out of the episodes, there was usually like one golden nugget like out of each episode, and that was the nugget for that episode.
Okay. In addition to that, while I completely agree, the golden chair scene, when Percy getting completely covered in gold for no freaking reason, like, I understand they had to be friends and everything, but I completely echo everything you just said. But in addition to that, in the book, Grover's the one who saves them from the tunnel.
Thank you.
And Grover's sitting here at the diner having a conversation with Ares. What the
I
hell was
know.
that? There's no reason. There's no reason at all to have Grover at the diner with Ares.
It
And in
didn't.
addition to that, the episode ends with Grover going, guys, I know who did it. And then the reveal is, oh, you suspect it's Ares' daughter. Get the fuck out of here. There's no reason. Like, there's that buildup, and all of a sudden, it's Ares' daughter. But
Yeah, and
give me that. Get out of here.
And I
Ugh.
think what's so weird is they had that same suspicion in the book, where maybe it's Clarice, but they didn't waste a whole episode to get to that conclusion. I constantly just found myself just screaming, what is the reason? What was the reason for them doing things like that? Where to skip way ahead when they're in the underworld and Annabeth gets split up from the group, I was just like, what is the conscious reasoning behind this? Because it affects the story zero. Because guess what? If she's with them, it's the same story. And if she's without them, basically the only change you're making is that you're upsetting your fans. And constantly things like that, where it's like things that just didn't make sense story wise. Even when I'm looking at this as just a TV show with no connection to anything, it didn't make sense to the story they were telling.
Again, another one that really popped out to me, not to keep ragging on it.
You're good.
But the deadline passing, that was a
Yeah. Oh, I'm
change.
so mad.
It was a nonsensical change in the entire show because there was zero consequence for it. It's supposed to have meaning. War should have broken out. So there was no consequence for the deadline passing. So that's like writing 101, I
Yeah.
felt.
I
And
did.
they met the deadline in the book, didn't they?
Yes, they met the
did.
deadline. And the
They
thing is,
to change that.
they understood what they were trying to do. With that one where they were trying to be like, Percy's like choosing this path for himself and not just doing it because of some dumb quest. Guess what? He didn't have to do it because of the quest either. He could have just been like, screw your quest to begin in the first place, okay? It was one of those things they would include for drama, but then they just skip past it and be like, why is this here? Why did you add this in? And for me, I know we touched on the pacing in the previous episode. The pacing for me was just way off. But
Agreed.
also, these characters in the books are very active characters. They are very much choosing the actions. When something happens to them, they are acting back against it. Versus in this TV show, they felt very passive, where just things happened and then they kept happening. I think the best example of this is in the very first episode when Electra is attacking Percy. And in the books and in the movies, Percy then uncaps a pen, discovers there's a sword, and is just, I'm going to murder my math teacher, who is now become this flying demon coming towards me. In the TV show, he just freezes and just gracefully falls over and, oops, oh no, I accidentally uncapped this pen. And oh my gosh, it's a sword that just flies through my math teacher who turned to ash. What's happening? Is this a dream? It's very much just things happening to the characters that they'll just rolling with it. And so I got why they were like, now Percy's choosing his own path because the deadline passed. But they didn't actually change that they were still passive characters.
Yeah, I feel like there was a lot of stuff that didn't make sense to me. And I know we could talk about it all night, but them having to choose who was going to be left behind in the underworld was one of the biggest moments in the book, if I remember correctly. And it didn't have any impact.
They only had 3 pearls in the book to begin with. They were like debating, I'm going to stay behind, I'm going to stay behind. And in the book, that's Percy choosing his path. That's him making this huge choice. And he chose the friends and the bolt and the world over his mother because he's, I'm coming back for you though. And it's crazy. And you're like, whoa, because this whole time they've been like, how are we going to get your mother out? And then you get 4 pearls. And then oops, 1 pearl is gone. And it's like, why did you even give them 4 then to begin with? Maybe it's because Poseidon was trying to be that.
I wanted to take a moment to thank our Cinema Club supporters. Your monthly contributions are appreciated and help keep the show running and growing, as it definitely does take a few software and editing subscriptions on Nick and I's end to create these episodes. If you love the show and would be interested in financially supporting the Cinema Club for even 99 cents a month, visit our website and click the Support This Podcast button. You can check that out at podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/the Cinema Club. Let's jump back into the episode.
Speaking of Poseidon, can we talk about his appearance in episode 8? The scene starts out with him just randomly appearing, Percy and Zeus talking, and then all of a sudden appears out of nowhere. What?
Yeah.
Get out of here.
I will say, I did like Zeus and Poseidon's casting. Hades, I couldn't tell. I love Hades in the books. And I actually thought Lin-Manuel, good job as Hermes, but I enjoyed his entrance in the second book better, which again, there was no point to having here. And I thought Ares was a really good casting.
Yeah,
I
this
would agree
was,
with that.
I believe this was Lance Riddick's last TV performance as
Last acting performance ever.
acting performance period. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Lance Riddick, Zeus.
The actor who played
But he shows up in future seasons.
The
the character
actor-
does, but the actor died.
Oh, that's what there was like a in loving memory of, but I didn't know who was.
Yes.
I didn't know he died. Oh my gosh, that's so sad. He was really good. Oh shoot, that was sad.
Yeah, he only had 3 minutes of screen time.
He did a good
Um,
job with.
yeah, it was cool seeing him one last time. And I agree with you, Ruby, on the casting for Percy's dad. I thought that was really good. I really enjoyed that performance. I thought that was spot on. I've also, on a positive note too, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I've really enjoyed Percy's mom in the TV show. I feel like they've fully fledged her character out in the
Yes.
TV show when compared to the book. So I definitely appreciate those changes when it comes to Percy's mother.
Yes, I would say with a minor change, but still a change, I would say having more interactions of Sally's character and seeing her with the challenges of raising Percy. I actually quite enjoyed that. I thought the casting for her character was great. Not sure how I feel about the Sally Poseidon whole scene, but I did really enjoy her character and the storyline they did with her.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I also didn't know how to feel about the Sally Poseidon scene either. I'm inclined to not like it personally, but
Yes,
that's
I'm
just me.
inclined to not like it too, because here's the issue I have with it. They didn't show up for their kids. That was the whole point. They like weren't ever there. But on a different positive note, I like a lot of the casting choices that they did. I like Walker, Lee, Aryan as their characters. I think they're great actors. I think they were great picks. I don't think they were well written to their characters though. The two characters I think that were cast phenomenally, that their characters were so well written in this and that their performances were fantastic, were Clarice and Luke. Oh my goodness. They may not have been book accurate looking, but they were honestly probably two of my favorite performances in the whole TV show. I really liked them as those characters and they did a phenomenal job.
I will agree with Clarice. Luke, I'm going to disagree because I don't think we got
Mm.
to spend enough time with Luke. So it's not that I dislike Luke, but I don't think we were given enough time with Luke to form an opinion to begin with.
Yeah, I don't think we were given enough time with Luke either. I did know what Charlie did with the time we were given. I'm wondering if in the future seasons we'll get flashbacks maybe of his childhood. But if season 2 does get a green light, which I'm assuming it does because some episodes have already been written for it, and this has been a huge series, I would be really excited to see Clarice more in the storyline and Luke as well.
Yeah, I
Would
would
you
agree with that. Part of me wants to see the second season because they've made so many different changes to this that I'm not sure how I would feel about season 2 happening because, again, you can keep to the story with some of it, but at the same time, you've made so many changes. How is season 2 going to look? And is it going to still remain book accurate in order to keep continuity ahead with the first season?
Yeah, I think if they do make a second season, there's a lot of things I would want them to either change or improve upon, like maybe longer episodes, more episodes, some better writing.
Delving into the mythology?
Yeah, it's hard because they have changed quite a few things. Do you go back to book accurate or do you continue on with what you've done? I think they do need to be careful because towards the end of the series, I did start receiving more criticism, which for the longest time, people kept being like, this is exactly how I imagined it. This is literally a dream come true. This is perfect adaptation. And I was like, no, it's not. No, it's good, but it's not that good. And then towards the end, when things started getting a bit messier, people did start getting a bit more upset. And so I think if they do continue on with this series, they need to be a bit more mindful of some of the stuff. Because let's be honest, these books were huge. It's a huge fandom. Most people watching this are older now. They read the books as kids and now they're older and they're the ones watching it. And if you're making mad the fandom you built this off of, it's not going to keep going.
True.
Yeah, because I think they're planning to try and make 5 seasons, one for each of the 5 books in the franchise, if
Mm.
it gets greenlit for a second season, of course. But I'm sure likely that the plot will take notes from the second novel, The Sea Monsters.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, that's enough criticism. Can I talk about something that I actually did enjoy? This is one change that I actually thought was really well done. I thought the scene where they entered the casino was actually really well done for what it is. The part that made me the happiest was the virtual reality game they put on Grover. I wanted that to happen so bad because that's actually one of my favorite parts in the book was the reverse hunter where the animals hunt down the humans video game that Grover plays in the book. That's actually one of my favorites, little nuggets that they put in the book. So they showed him doing that in the casino. So that made me happy. But overall, change it from like a hotel and arcade to an actual casino makes a lot more sense with a 2022 adaptation. Because you don't have a ton of arcades and stuff. Like, yes, that makes it more fantastical and more mythological and akin with the fantasy in the book. But if you want to draw in a more like adult audience, I think that was a good change to make because that's going to draw in more adults because they're more akin to wanting to be at the casino as opposed to arcade with virtual reality video games.
This is a little book nugget for the book readers. In the arcade scene, they actually have in the background Nico and Bianca, which I was really glad they did include that, a little Easter egg for all the book readers to find. That was very sweet. And in that episode, I will say the golden nugget for that episode was Percy driving. I was like, this is unnecessary to have Hermes in this episode, but I really did love that scene. It did give Percy's chaotic streak a bit more light than we had gotten so far, and it was quite enjoyable.
Yeah, for sure. And like he instantly gets angry at somebody driving while he's driving the cab. Like you can't get more New York than that.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. Watch where you're going. Rob Roka can't jump.
For sure. But I also agree it was very unnecessary to have Hermes in this scene. But that choice they made, though, since they cast Lin-Manuel Miranda as Hermes, that casting choice was very well done, and I agree with that. But it's a way to get like a celebrity cameo in for the episode to draw on people like, oh, I like Lin-Manuel Miranda. Let's watch that episode of Percy Jackson. I get why they did it. It was an attempt to try and draw in other people, maybe some of the Hamilton crowd.
I've seen Lin-Manuel in actually a different book adaptation, his Dark Materials, and he's excellent in that. I know a lot of people were very unsure when they first found out he was going to be Hermes, but I was like, I know he's going to do a good job. And he did. I am hoping he still gets his 2 scenes-ish in the second book, if the second scene does happen, because I really like that introduction that we get to Hermes. I didn't want to say, just because Christopher mentioned this back a bit ago when he was talking about the scene with Frosty. We talked about how the characters just didn't quite feel the same. And for me, it was that Annabeth was very brazen, but not in the way she is in the book. She's intelligent in the TV show as well. Very intelligent, but the way that it worked was like Percy was very street smart and Annabeth was very book smart. And Annabeth was super respectful of the gods, like crazy, like you don't blab at the gods. And when you look at the burger scene with her and Ares, or the scene with Hephaestus, or her stealing Hermes' car keys, none of those things really fit her character and here's what's happening. And then when you look at Percy, I dig that Sally had raised Percy up with this knowledge of his history and his life and his family for the future. I think it was smart of her to do. However, it then took away where Percy just really had no idea what was happening. So he's like, why should I be afraid of this guy? He's wearing a trench coat. What's so scary about that? And then Annabeth showing her intelligence where she's like, this is this person. This is this story where he's very book smart. And he's, oh yeah, I read the like graphic novel of the Odyssey and stuff. And then because their characters were a bit like mixed up and gone, I felt like Grover was there just pick up the pieces from them, and it got messy towards the end.
I was going to say, I did really like the scene with Percy and Luke in the woods. Visually, I felt that was maybe the first time that I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. Just with like the fireworks behind them going off and everything, with the changing colors and whatnot reflecting on their faces and the atmosphere along with the music. I thought that was really well done. As far as Percy, again, he figured out Kronos was behind stuff. He figured out Luke was the friend that betrayed him. It was very, again, anticlimactic because the reveal was spoiled constantly, but I overall enjoyed it.
Hold on 1 second. What do you mean by the reveal was spoiled constantly?
For example, Percy, when he was talking with Hades in the underworld, he was like, "Oh, wait, I know who stole the bolt." And it's, "Oh, how did you come to that conclusion all of a sudden with no information?" And then again with Luke, it was, "Oh, you're the one that betrayed me." And he had all the information beforehand to make that enlightened result, but he didn't come to that. So that was annoying to me. That was like the one note I wrote down in these last episodes was, "Oh, Percy constantly spoils the reveal by just magically knowing everything."
It was always like he knew exactly who every like Greek mythological person was. And I was like, boy didn't know anything in the books. He was constantly just walking around. What's happening? Who is this? I'm going to fight him. Do agree with you. I did really actually like the scene between Luke and Percy. It was probably one of the better ones out of the last 4 episodes. Visually, very pretty as well. And I would say I was okay without the whole scorpion thing. I did like the fight scene. I thought that was cool. And I think it was one of the few changes that I was okay with.
I have to ask a question. Ruby, how Luke escapes, that's the doorway into the labyrinth, right?
Oh, shoot. I didn't even realize that.
So
That
they
is how he gets out. That's completely right. That's probably what it is. That's so good.
Okay. So I just need a clarification. That one ain't supposed to be in the show? Because that's how
Yes.
he escapes in the book.
That makes sense because I couldn't quite remember because Percy passes out. And so I'm like, does Luke just leave camp? But I do remember that now, the 4th book and everything, which
Okay.
makes sense because I thought he was opening a pit to tar. And I was like, okay, what's happening here? But that makes so much more sense.
Yeah, so that's what it is in the book, but that completely ruins a super big twist early on in book 4.
Yeah, and that's true. They don't know
Because
he can get
they
in that.
got the fucking Hellhound scene out. They're completely mucking up things and spoiling things for future seasons because they got rid of the Hellhound scene. So the whole bit with Luke being a traitor is nowhere as powerful as it was in the book because you completely cut out the Hellhound scene when they're playing Capture the Flag. Percy is attacked by a Hellhound. And the other reason why it was important that Percy completely passed out is we don't know how Luke escaped. And that's how he escapes. But now we know how Luke escaped, and that completely messes up stuff in the future for a huge reveal.
Also, Annabeth showing up. I was like, girl, what are you even doing here? You were supposed to be going and getting Chiron. Why were you following them? They never explained that. And it goes into her and Luke's relationships a bit and their backstory, but not really. And by far not as deep enough. And that's why I feel like Charlie, who plays Luke, did a really good job because in that scene when he sees Anna choosing Percy and the gods over him, you can see the pain and the betrayal in his eyes as well as like Annabeth. And that's why I think he did such a good job because even though we didn't get a lot of that backstory or get to know his character, he did a good job showing just how much that hurt him, where you have it in the back of your mind and then you're like, oh, wow, that's really deep.
Yeah, I did think it was funny too how Annabeth just waited such a long time to reveal herself. She was just watching Percy get several hits in before helping out.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because it's just like, why was she invisible? Why was she just running through the woods invisible and then she happened to be there right in time invisible? Or was she just like hearing this whole big reveal and then just watching Percy and Luke beat it out of each other? Again, it was just one of those things that they did that had no explanation.
Yeah. In addition to that, did they explain the whole deal with Luke's sword? I forget.
They did not. Which
Yeah.
that's how the conversation starts. Because he like litters and Percy's just a big deal around here, man. And then he like shows him the sword and he's backbiter, can kill mortals and immortals. And he's, wait, what? And then it goes crazy downhill. And with this, it's just, look at this cool sword. And I'm like, cool. Am I going to get the backstory on it?
That annoyed me greatly. They didn't explain that. I will agree that the fight scene was very well choreographed. So that was cool. It was cool with all the fireworks and stuff. But the context of the fight was frustrating.
The writing as a whole needs to improve a lot for season 2 because they were squandering the material that they had. I felt like every time I was watching an episode, honestly.
Yeah. And I was glad they included that tiny snippet of Percy and Luke, which in some ways
Yeah.
it's a spoiler with who the delight me be. Oh my goodness. But on the other hand, we finally got to see a bit more of Luke and Percy. And I think it did fit well with the context where if you were watching it and you didn't know what was going on, you'd be able to connect enough with, oh, he's talking to gods and everything. I constantly see streaming services do this when they have a series that they start to adapt. You have a literal gold mine. You have a lot of books, and you have a fandom that will faithfully follow you pretty much through whatever you do. You'll milk that for everything it's worth. Like, oh, there's 20 books in this series. Guess how many seasons you're going to get? You milk it. And I feel now what they're doing is they're just rushingly putting something together. And like you said, they're squandering a very big opportunity for themselves. And I don't want to see it go downhill. I really want this to work out. One thing I had a question about the whole ending, like the very, very ending in the book, Gabe gets turned into stone by Medusa's head, which didn't seem to happen in this series. And
Oh,
I'm
it did.
confused.
It
No,
did.
it
It was a
didn't.
post-credit scene.
Yeah.
I did not get to see that. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I'm gonna have to go find that and watch it.
Yep.
I almost
Darn
texted
it.
you guys, hey, stick around to the post-credit scene.
I will say they did make a behind the scenes, the making of the TV show. That's 50 minutes that I think would be fun to watch. Because honestly, I know a lot of my thoughts on this series are very degrading and frustrated. But when it comes to the cast, for the most part, I've watched all the interviews, all the snippets that they've posted, and the cast is honestly so perfect. And I'm just like, why are you wasting this with bad writing? Because when you look at the actors, they're Percy, they're Annabeth, they're Grover. It's clearly not them that's having an issue communicating it over to the screen. It's the writing. And it shows that they're a good actor, that they can do what's written for their character, but it's not the character that they naturally are. And I hope if they do continue with the series, they fix the writing a bit. Because I feel like, honestly, the writing and the pacing are the two biggest issues with the series.
Yeah, I agree completely.
I will say that the TV show has been a lot more positively received than the movies.
That is good.
Yes, as far as Rotten Tomatoes goes, with Percy Jackson and the Olympians television series, the show ended with a 92% critic score and an 81% audience score. So, vast majority of people were having a really good time with the show as a whole.
Yes.
Seems-
We are in the minority here.
We are indeed.
Something I did think was really interesting is that on a per episode basis, I just looked it up. Every episode costs between 12 and 15 million to make.
Yes. I actually knew it was about 12 million.
That's on par with The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I will say for the most part, the effects were very good, is what I would say. However, I felt like with the budget that they had, it could have been better. Underworld was a letdown for me. The chapters in the Underworld are some of my favorites. I was like, what's happening here? More of a design choice with that one, but Tide, I was like, what's happening? Why is it just this beam of light shown off camera? And then here's a sword.
Yeah, they finally showed it in the last
I
episode.
know. I was like, what is the budget going on into? And I know Tim disagrees with me on this. I didn't like the design of a lot of the monsters. I thought they were very well CGI done. You didn't think you were looking at CGI. I just didn't prefer the design of them. But I would say I didn't enjoy the design of a lot of things, but with the design they went with, they did execute well. Mount Olympus,
That makes sense.
they didn't love the design, but it was executed very well with what they did. I'm just
I
being
can
a
agree with that.
hater. I'm just being a hater. I know I am. I can catch myself when I'm doing it.
For sure. Yeah, no, I agree. I like the design of a lot of the monsters for the most part. I enjoyed the way they were designed. So yes, I will disagree with you on that, Ruby.
Yeah. I want to ask your opinion because you've all read the books. And so I didn't know if this was just me. I thought that the way the gods were portrayed was a bit on the nose and over the top, where it was one of those things where when you look at the series as a whole, you take the main picture and use it and you're like, oh, this is the end result. and you use that in the very beginning when you're adapting stuff and you don't use any of the steps to get to the end result, where everyone's mad at the gods constantly and the gods are just like, I don't know. I felt like there was too many in the storyline where there's supposed to be these like very, in the beginning at least, far off cool creature kind of as you continue on, more and more people get set up. You see the horrors that they commit. You see how dispensable basically their children are to them. And you see the demigods get angrier. Versus I felt like we just started there where there's so many gods running around and they're all just behaving like children and all the demigods are already all mad at them. And it's like, where's the story growth? I don't know if you guys had that same feeling.
Yeah, I think again it comes down to writing. It could have benefited from another 2 episodes not dealing with super CGI heavy items. You could still probably stick to your budget of around 10 million per episode that way. But yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying with the gods. It was, oh, here's the god of the week, basically, in the show. And again, I think it's because of the writing, but also the pacing of the show that didn't set up
I feel
that.
like we would have been able to spend more time on monsters and getting a more climactic thing with the monsters if it hadn't been like, and here's a god. And you're like, oh, hi.
And we would have had more time to delve into the mythology, and a lot more things would have made more sense. Like, they just kept biting themselves in the butt with everything else because you didn't spend enough time dealing with one thing. You rush from thing to thing. You didn't have time. And things would have eventually fallen into place if you just maintained the proper pace.
It is weird because I was going to ask what your thoughts on this were, because we keep talking about the pace of the show feeling rushed. But then as I was watching the show, there were moments where I was tuning out of it. Like I wasn't engaged with it, which is a weird combination to have. And again, I think it points to the writing lacking.
Yeah, I would say the reason for that, for me at least, is the pacing was very rushed, where it was that thing where it's like, we're going to take these scenes from the books and we're just going to touch on each one for 5 minutes. And then we're going to add these 5 things and we're going to touch on those for 5 minutes. So it's all very rushed. It feels very pushed. You're not getting any time to really settle into a scene. But then what happens is, since you have no investment in everything, so you don't care. And so you're just basically watching 45 minutes of meaningless cinema. And then you're bored, but you still feel like you're missing out on something. For me, at least. I don't know, Tim, what do you think?
I agree with everything you just said. And as a testament to how poor the writing is, the book is not a slow-paced book by any stretch of the imagination. It is a very fast-paced book, but it still takes enough time so you get engaged with everything. And this didn't do that. So if you make the show just as fast-paced as the book, it's almost faster paced than the book. And the book is not a slow paced book. It's not Game of Thrones. There is always something happening. And that's one of the things I enjoy about it. But you always have time to explain this or explore that or talk about this again, it just all comes back down to the terrible writing.
Yeah. And honestly, for the predominant part of this fandom, we love the characters. That's what we love about this series. We love the plot, we love the stories, we love the mythology, but really it's the characters that make the books. And the fact that we never really got to just have an honest interaction where always something was happening, where in the books, there's always something happening, but you really get a good grip of the characters and their relationships. And then it's, oh my gosh, the world's ending. We have to go do something about it. Where with this, it was focusing more on the world ending and less on the characters who were going to stop it. And I think that's also another reason why you weren't as invested, where you're seeing this cool action scene, but you don't care because you never really got attached to the characters. I felt like the other thing that got pushed actually a lot was the love story between Annabeth and Percy, which they're super cute to me. I love them. Who doesn't? But for me, I felt like they didn't realize they had a crush on each other until the third-ish book.
It is the third book.
Yeah, it's the third book. Maybe Annabeth likes him before that, but it's like the third book where Percy's, wait, something's happening. Puberty. This is weird. And they were kids. They were friends. And in the TV show, they're not even friends. But then you have this love angst angle being pushed. And it's like, build them a friendship first, goodness gracious. And
Yes.
everyone's enemies to lovers. Oh my goodness. I'm like, no, it's friends to lovers. And right now they're just supposed to be friends. Give me back my friendship. I want them. And I feel
Yeah.
like nothing paid off. Wasn't actually paid off. The best scene I can think of this is when he's fighting Ares in the season finale. 2-minute fight. I couldn't have cared less. That fight scene is so cool in the books. It's amazing. It is so fun to read about. I wasn't very excited watching it, and it was quite the disappointment. Also, I need to ask this of both of you. Does Percy in the original series ever make a wave? I cannot think of one time he ever made a wave. Every water power I remember was him being like in a bubble underwater or being like waterproof. He really hasn't figured out his water powers. I don't know if in the future books, if he does or not. I could be very wrong though. It was a cool visual thing to watch. I was like, oh dang, this is kind of cool. The sort of Poseidon sort of thing. It was cool to watch. It was a little anticlimactic, but I admit it was cool. I will say that.
He starts to realize his powers more in book 3.
Okay.
So the
Perhaps.
first 2 books, he's still, I don't know what to do about this. But in book 1, he does not make the wave like that.
Yeah. And again, I will say that the fight between Ares and Percy, it was well choreographed. And I actually thought there was some really cool camera work in it too. Like when he goes down and he like kind of slices his leg, there's a really cool camera movement that goes with it.
Yes.
So well choreographed shot. It's just that because of the writing, you don't care. And it's so maddening.
And in addition to that, they just completely dropped the storyline about them being wanted felons. Like
I know.
the scene with Ares, there's a whole police escort
This,
around that
like
fight
the
around that beach.
entire,
Like
yeah.
the entirety of law enforcement and fire department and every news camera and helicopter is at that
Yeah.
beach. We're recording the fight and there's nothing.
And I feel like it didn't
Jack
go into
squad.
the mist a lot either, which played a big scene in that role, where there's a lot of lore, more like Camp Half-Blood lore that was in the books, that very basic knowledge that you needed that they didn't include in the TV show, like the mist and all of this stuff with Camp Half-Blood. And nothing bothers me more when they're adapting something, when they change the lore and then break the lore. When Percy's dad gives him a pearl, which the pearl returns to the sea, which is why when you break the pearl, no matter where you are, you return to the sea, which is why they came out by the beach. And then he has another pearl and he drops him. And also, I would say Walker did an excellent job acting that scene where he goes from this like hopeful love to just like sadness and hurt. But his dad drops the pearl, and then suddenly he's just on the grass outside of Camp Half-Blood. And that's the sea. You just broke your own lore. And it was stupid. And it made me mad. It was a very small detail, but I was just like, what even is this?
Yep. I would agree with that.
Yeah, it sounds like overall, all three of us were disappointed, mostly with the writing aspect of the show. We liked the casting, we liked visuals for the most part. It sounds
Yeah.
like choreography, but the writing was what really nuked it, I think, as far as an enjoyment level for all three of us, which is sad because I think all three of us were pretty excited
Yeah.
for this one.
Yeah. And I really want them to recognize that it's an issue so that they're able to fix it before it's too late. Because the thing is, if you keep either cutting out fan favorite scenes, like how Percy has a funeral at the end of book 1 and he shows up to it and everyone, we thought you were dead. That's a fan favorite scene. Or if you keep giving those scenes and then just very underwhelmingly giving someone a scene like that, you're going to start making the fandom mad. And then you won't get the green light on new seasons. And I personally do want more. Want this to be good. It has so much potential from the actors and from the original content to be a really great TV show. And so I do hope maybe they'd be able to look at some of the stuff and improve upon it.
Before the actors get too old for their characters.
Yeah, they've already gotten quite a lot of growth spurts.
Maybe they need to start shooting season 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't want to like rag on the show too much. I do think it was constructive criticism that we were sharing. So I appreciate you both doing that. As far as upcoming television shows, adapting material. I am very hopeful for Avatar: The Last Airbender coming out later this month. I know there was another trailer release today. I haven't checked it out yet, but
I haven't watched it. I didn't know that.
I'm not going to watch it. I'm going to just watch the show when it airs.
I don't think I'm gonna
Okay.
watch just because I've been watching a lot of adaptations recently, and each adaptation just leaves me more brokenhearted than the next. So I think I'm gonna stop looking at stuff and just watch it when it comes out. I really want to end this podcast on a good note about like the TV show or something because I feel like, especially me, just rags on it for an hour. Is there anything like this was really good that we didn't already cover that we could talk about?
The thing that I really appreciated was the scene in the credits, like before the credits rolled, the In Loving Memory of Lance Reddick, especially in the wake of the John Wick movies. That man has become one of the most beloved actors. And for him to just pass so suddenly was very sad. And I'm glad they gave that man his flowers in the credits because he was a nice guy. Like, I really enjoyed him as an actor and as a person. So that made me very happy that they included that.
And with his scene, like I said, he did such a good job acting. I was like, dang, really good.
For sure.
I feel like his presence in that scene was one of the few times that even though you're like, nothing's going to happen to Percy, he had such an intimidating presence that you could feel it through the screen. You were low-key kind of terrified when he like raised that boat. You're like, oh, he's about to blast this kid into oblivion, where he did do a very good job. And
Yeah.
it is very sad that we won't get to see him in future seasons. But instead, on a happy note.
no, I think that's a bittersweet note to end on. But as we previously talked about on the Cinema Club, a lot of good television shows, hopefully, releasing this year yet. I'm super excited for, was it Shogun?
Oh, shoot. When does that premiere?
That comes out
Soon, isn't it?
That comes out very soon.
Yeah, I think it's like end of
I
month,
just saw
right?
something about it again that popped up on my feed, and I was like, ooh,
Yeah,
I
February
forgot about that.
27th.
All right. I'm excited for that.
Yes.
I don't know how I'm going to get to all the TV shows that I now know about that are coming out this year.
On Adam's recommendation, I have been watching Night Country. I'll caught up on that. I have mixed emotions about it, but I'm definitely here for the rest of the ride.
Are you watching the fourth one now, Ben, if you're all cut up?
Yeah, I just jumped into season 4. I didn't watch season 1
Oh,
to 3.
okay.
But yeah, there's a ton of TV that is very enjoyable out there
Yeah.
to dive into, for
Respect.
sure. But yeah, thank you both so much for taking the time. Appreciate it. Even though we didn't love Percy Jackson Olympians, I think there was a lot of elements that we did enjoy, and I still have hope that they can turn it around in a second season if it does get greenlit.
You have more hope than me.
I think it's possible. I just think that they need to be able to recognize it. Unlikely, but possible.
Agreed.
Here's to hoping. Well, with
Here's
that,
to hope.
thank you so much, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Cinema Club. If you would be interested in coming on the show in the future, please email us at thecinemaclubtcc@gmail.com. Also, if you have not yet already done so, I would encourage you to join the Cinema Club Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/thecinemaclubtcc, where we share what television series or films will be featured in upcoming episodes on the show. I'm sure you're listening to this episode on your preferred streaming platform, but I wanted to make you aware that you do have options. The Cinema Club is available on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and now YouTube as well at the Cinema Club Podcast. Please also consider giving the show a review on iTunes, as it does really help the show. And finally, we are completely supported by listeners like you. If you love the show, please consider visiting our website and clicking the Support This Podcast button. You can check that out at podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/the Cinema Club. Your contribution of even 99 cents a month goes directly to maintaining and growing the Cinema Club podcast. Thank you so much to those of you who already financially do support the Cinema Club, and we will catch you on the next one.